What's up, guys? I'm Alex Bromley. I am here at the majestic Elite FTS Training Center. Today, we're going to cover some deadlift tips. Now, these are specifically going to help people who are trying to stay durable or have some injuries are working around. They're trying to fix something that's going on with the midsection lower back. And B, anybody who has a vested interest in being a more efficient puller and getting more out of their efforts. Now, you might be thinking, Bromley, you don't deadlift 900 pounds. Why would we listen to you? And you would be absolutely right. In fact, I don't deadlift 800 pounds. But as the saying goes, the best coaches are the mediocre athletes who tried really hard to get good. And I think I fall into that camp. I spent about 10 years just holding on by the skin of my teeth. I had a hard time getting my deadlift very far over 600 pounds because I was routinely getting injured. And I still had to compete with these monster middleweight strongmen that deadlift 850, 900 pounds. And I had to match the hip extension. I had to match the loading, the carrying, and so on. And eventually I had to figure out my deadlift. And I did. Using these principles, I got my back healthy. It's been about 6 years since I've had an issue. And I've been able to put about 150 pounds on my pull in that time. So hopefully this stuff is relevant to you. Hopefully there's some takeaways. Now, if you believe that it makes you durable, there's some controversy around this, but I do. If you believe this makes you durable, it's in your best interest to practice these. Either way, worst case scenario, it doesn't, and it's all a wash as far as who gets injured based on which setup. This is still a better way to maintain rigidness, to prevent strength leak. Because if you're firing your hips and legs to pull into that bar, and if you're giving here, meaning you want that bar to go up and this is going down, that's inefficient. You're leaving pounds on the table. And I personally believe that will lead to more injury long term. Worst case scenario, it takes pounds off your pull. That's no bueno. So we want to skip that. So this is going to come down to posture. What's going on with your ribs? What's going on with your hips? If you stumbled across Brian Carroll or Stu McGill's stuff, Gift of Injury is a great book. Back Mechanics, a great book. Chris Duffin has done some stuff on this. So this might not seem that new to you, but it's worth doing a refresher course. So that's what we're going to do. So right here, we have our lifter. I know these are kind of cartoonish comic book proportions. I grew up on 90s comic books. Body positivity people think it's unfair that Barbie is not made to scale. Try growing up with Colossus and Wolverine as your main inspiration for what the male body should look like. Anyways, don't nitpick my drawings. This is a guy who has an excessive arch in his lower back. This is somebody who, if you can imagine, I tried drawing somebody holding a barbell here, but it looked like he was holding his junk. So just use your imagination. Hips coming through, head up, really trying to nail that lockout, getting the shoulders back. Some of you might identify with that curve with the shoulders back, with the anterior pelvic tilt right here. This is the hips pointed down to the front and the ribs flaring up. So the analogy that's given, keep the soda can stacked. If you imagine these are the tops of a soda can, that's a dented can. I've also heard don't bust your biscuits. That's another good analogy for what's going on. Now, the idea here with this posture, and it's exactly the same thing if you're rounded forward the other way. If you're one of these lifters that just dumps forward and hangs on your erectors and just says a prayer every time you do a deadlift that everything's going to be okay. What you're doing is you are destabilizing the spine. You are making you are allowing for strength leak. You're making it harder to keep that rigid because these structures, the ribs, you can look at the diaphragm and the pelvic floor are not stacked on top of each other. So right here, you can see when the ribs flare, and you can experiment with this. Really try to open up your chest. Like you're really getting really broad in the front right here. Your abdominals stretch. If you get an ab cramp and you're trying to stretch, that's exactly what you do. You arch like you're getting set up for a bench attempt. The abs open up. So a stretched muscle is going to be weaker structurally. You're going to have a lot less receptivity. And on the other hand, over here, the erectors are going to be really compacted. So some of you guys that have back pumps is like a main problem. You can't get through a workout because you keep getting back pumps. Well, if your deadlifts look like what you do on a reverse hyper, if you're going through this stretch shortening cycle, you are driving blood in there the way you drive air into a bicycle tire. It's like pumping up your bicep with a set of curls. So no wonder you're getting a back pump. Your goal, however you set up, I don't even necessarily care that you set up like this or slightly rounded forward. A lot of really good deadlifters do. What I care about is that that lower back is frozen in space and that it doesn't move. And the best way to do that is to bring the ribs down, provided that they're flared. If you tend to hunch over anyways, don't work into it. We're trying to reach this idea of neutral, where the ribs, the diaphragm are stacked directly over the pelvic floor. And also by neutralizing our hips, if you do have that anterior pelvic tilt, if the butt sticks back, bringing it under, squeezing your glutes, kind of tucking your hips under just a bit to reach this standard. What that does, that takes your hamstrings, which are stretched when you're in that position. That takes your abdominals that are stretched when you're in that position. And that takes your glutes, which are stretched, and it tightens them just a little bit. So aside from injury prevention or being able to work around back issues, it gives you more purchase in those muscles so you can feel them fire at the start of your deadlift. So this is our idea of neutral. So heads down. Remember, you don't have to look up at the sky. You should be able to position your chest, your midsection, your hips, regardless of what your head is doing. But neutral position, ribs stacked over the hips, glutes start tight, hamstrings start tight, abdominals are tight. Now that's key, because abdominal work, most of you guys are just monsters. It can move all kinds of weight. Knees, hips can extend under crazy amounts of load. But most of you have a midsection like I used to have that's essentially made out of tapioca pudding. You want to be able to maintain rigidness, and that starts by learning how to brace your abs and by learning how to stay tight and rigid, especially under load. And it takes some work. I recommend looking into the McGill 3. It's a good place to start. You do things like bird dogs, dead bugs, side planks. You start with positioning, then you build endurance. Then once you have that down, you start to apply strength and start to increase the load over time. But we're going to show in a minute how to apply this to your deadlift. So ribs are down, everything's tight. By being braced and by learning how to breathe into those abdominals, 90-90 breathing, it's another good exercise where you're on the floor, feet up on the wall. But you practice breathing into the tensed abs. So everything's locked in. You're breathing. This is resistance, and all the air is coming up here. And you guys that are used to just strapping on your belt extra tight and just taking a big belly breath and shoving everything out, you tend to play into this dysfunction. And you can look at guys that have had trouble later into their career. You know, it's quick and dirty for handling a bunch of weight on your back. But long term, you should be able to handle a lot of weight in a compromised position with a round, with crazy amounts of weight, without necessarily having to rely on a belt, because you know how to turn your midsection into a belt, get that circumferential pressure from tightening everything up, breathing into it, creating that stability. And even now, I practice that when I do wear a belt, where abs are locked in, breathing into the tensed abs, and then I squeeze everything around that. And it's helped me through crazy deadlift medleys, through carry medleys, through loading. So we're going to take this, and I'm going to show you guys real quick on this bar how to apply it, because you don't have to go through months of bird dogs, dead bugs, and anything else. You can start today and start to apply this to your setup. So however you set up, whether you're a guy that's knees way over the bar using a lot of leg drive, or whether you're a guy that sets way back, shins vertical, and turns it more into like a hip sled type movement, regardless of the situation, having this posture is going to allow you to brace and stay rigid with more weight, which means more efficiency, which means you get more horsepower out of the main movers, the hips and the knees. So think about a plank. That's how we're starting out. If you're on the ground, you're in a plank. If your back hurts on a plank, it's because you're arched. Think about setting yourself up in a position, getting those hips forward, ribs down. So now you're braced and you can breathe. You can maintain that position. That's what the top of your deadlift should look like. Kettlebell swings are also great, because that snap at the top, you should be snapping into that plank. So the key of a deadlift is a hinge movement. Well, a hinge is not a hinge if your spine is getting into the mix. If you're rounding, if you're moving, that's unstable. So we want to practice a hinge. So ribs down, glutes tight, diaphragm stacked over the pelvic floor. And in this position, we release at the hips. And the idea is that you should be able to maintain this position the entire way. Now, some of you guys will pull way over the bar with your butt up, and you'll stiff leg the movement, and you can still set up in that position. Some of you guys, I've actually pulled like this for a long time. You think like a Jerry Pritchett deadlift, feet wide, hips back, head up. Either way, I can keep my ribs down, I can brace here, and I can bring my lats into it. I can get that arch back that clamps everything down. It's like a briefcase, the clips being latched down. And that gives you so much damn stability in here that when you squeeze those abs, there is no weak link. Everything is tight, everything's rigid. If you're having back issues, I strongly recommend doing work in that position, getting comfortable, neutralizing your spine. If you're having issues with back pumps, if you can't get through reps, if you're on the ground rolling around because everything's just tightening up on you, this is a good way to alleviate that. And like I said, long term, it's going to be more efficient pulling, more efficient reps. It's going to make sure you can transfer all that strength onto the bar when it counts. So thanks so much for watching, guys. This is Bromley at Elite FTS. Until next time, I'll see you.